Hello friends, Those Back Pages here. I hope you're well. Before you come at me with the pickaxe for tonight's episode title, let me explain. Hobby burnout fatigue is not real. Again, let me explain. Seeing a lot of sentiment lately from friends and around the interwebs about how people are burned out, they're fatigued with the hobby. Now, if this is an issue where it's hobby fund related, if it's a fund issue, I totally understand. There's only so many dollars to go around, and we all have to hobby how we can. But if it's an issue where it's the stuff that Panini and Topps is putting out now, whether your opinion is good or bad, it is definitely costly either way. And guess what? That's not going to stop. Their job is to make as much money as possible, and they figured out that cutting out the middleman as far as wax pricing goes is probably the best way to do that, and it seems to be successful. I could go on a rant here about the 2023 Topps Chrome update, but I'll save that for another time. So, I don't have burnout fatigue, and I really don't get it, and that's because I cast a wide net. What do you mean by that? Well, I always like to say I have a terrible focus as far as collecting goes, and that's true, and that seems to help because it just keeps me occupied in my brain about collecting this, that, and whatever. I think people that are extremely focused tend to either, again, the stuff they need is financially unavailable or literally unavailable to buy. And I get that. That could lead to some burnout. But I believe that we should be collecting many things. Again, hobby budget always comes first. You do not go into debt to collect collectibles. So, if you're listening to tonight's episode and you're feeling burnt out or fatigued, maybe consider, shifting your focus a little bit. Even, dare I say it, to another collectible, comics or coins or whatever it may be. Again, everyone's mileage is going to vary on this. And it is what it is, right, guys? I mean, you can't. You know how I feel about collecting. It's in the blood, so we collect. So, in that vein, I've got two cards to show off. One I've showed off before, and one I have not. So, if you go back to the end, you go back to the last months of 1972, a lot happened, and it didn't really even hit me until I got this card in, and it just kind of hit me all at once. So, everybody not everybody, but I think it's fairly well known that, excuse me, on December 31st, 1972, going into 73, that we lost our beloved Roberto Clemente. And this is one I've showed before, and I picked this up a while ago. And, what drew me to this card is that sometime after December 31st, 1972, whoever owned this card decided to write in blue ballpoint pen, dead December 31st, 1972. It's kind of hard to make out on the card. It's kind of hidden by his sleeve there. Great picture at Shea Stadium from his 1970 Topps card, which was the A little side rant. This was the first year since 1956 that they had gone back to referring to him as Roberto on the card. So 55 is rookie card, says Roberto. 56 says Roberto. And then in 1957, when they decided to make the cards this size, traditional as we know it now, they changed his name to Bob Clemente. And the Topps is the only, those Topps from 1957 to 1969, let that sink in a little bit, 1957 through 1969, on his Topps card it said Bob Clemente. And that, like I said, that's the only place I've ever seen him referred to as Bob Clemente. Take from that what you will. But he passed, and he did pass away. And whoever owned this card at the time, probably shortly thereafter, probably not too long thereafter, decided to celebrate him by writing that on the card they owned. And then over time, because this card is 53 years old, it wound up in a PSE 1 MK for Mark holder, and wound up in my collection. And I saw this, it's been a while now, it was graded a while ago. It's the pre-QR code, the shiny on the back, the hollow on the front. And I paid less than a blaster for this. I want to say it was about $30, because it was more of a novelty purchase. Some might call it morbid, but I was fascinated when I saw it listed, and I had to own it. So I went, I was able to win the auction and bring it home. So in the vein of like looking, always thinking, the brain churning, there are you're not going to see excuse me, you're not going to see everything all of the time. It just does not work that way. You're going to miss stuff. I rarely recommend looking at completed listings, because you can get really frustrated. Especially, you get that new feeling when alright, I want to collect XYZ, and then alright, first thing you go to eBay, alright, XYZ, well, look at all these options, I can't believe it, this cheap, this seems expensive, I really don't know, let me do some research, and then when you settle in on it, and then you look back, and you get to a point where you know what you're talking about, and then you go back and, man, how did this auction ended 9 weeks ago, and it was 8% of what I would have paid for it, and blah blah blah. I try to avoid that. I do it myself. I don't recommend anyone doing it because of those reasons itself, but it happens. So I'm actually working on it next time. I think I'm waiting for some stuff to come in. I am waiting for some stuff. I think next time I do have a brand new focus that I'm very eager to share with you guys, but not quite yet. So anyway, back to looking and mixing it up, and you never know what you're going to find on eBay. So back when I was, I want to say 10, 11, maybe 12 years old, I used to have 2 vintage cards, and I think I've talked about them both, but it was a 71 Seaver and a 53 Jackie Robinson Topps. And I sold them. I remember what happened with the Seaver. I think I've told it before, but I sold off the Seaver at the local card show I would go to every month, and later on in that show, after I sold it to the dealer, he said, "Hey, come here," and he showed. It wound up being trimmed, but I was a kid. He wasn't angry or anything. He just life lesson. But I don't remember what happened to the 53 Jackie. I must have just sold it. Obviously, it was raw, because we're talking 1983, 1984, Atlanta, somewhere in that area. I don't remember how I acquired it, and I don't remember what I got for it, but I don't own it anymore. And since then, I've never owned a Topps Playing Days Jackie Robinson. You know, I am fortunate enough. I have the Leaf rookie, and for a while now, I was like, I really want to pick up a Playing Days. You know, I'm kind of a stickler. I you know my feelings on gloving cards versus hitting cards, and horizontal versus vertical. But sometimes a card calls to you. So, you know, every once in a while, I search by ending soonest. You know, graded copies, ended soonest, auction. Hey, you never know what's going to show up, right? If you don't try, you don't win. If you don't set the snipe, you never win. So I've lost a few over the months, plus. But one showed up that caught my attention. And it was an auction from a very reputable and famous single seller. And so I knew I was going to have to pay tax on it. The GM tax, if you know the GM seller, is not sponsored, so there's no need to advertise. But you know, I'll give you a clue. He always puts set break in his title, and never did follow up what you'll see in a second. But so he had a bunch of stuff listed, and I saw this with a few days left. It wasn't when it first got listed, but it had some time left, and I showed it to a couple of my friends and said, check this out. And they said, oh wow, that's a U card. You got to own that. You got to win this. You got to make sure you win this. And I said, well, you know what? I certainly would like to win this. And let me just show it, and we'll talk a little bit about it. It's a 56 Topps Jackie Robinson in an SGC1. And the first thing that caught my eye when I saw it, you know, you can see the thumbnails in the video, in the listings, was the centering on it. The centering on it is fantastic. The corners are rounded. But what really, and I looked at it, I zoomed in on it in the listing, and what really caught my eye was it had writing on it. And it says there, died of heart attack, 10/24/72 in Stamford, Connecticut. So whoever owned that wrote that there, and they actually wrote it on the back there along the top. Same thing. So the centering on this certainly caught my eye, and the almost perfectly rounded corners caught my eye. It's got some snow, which normally here would have killed my interest in it. But the writing really, immediately when I saw this, I thought of the Clemente that I have. And then when I got this in, it did hit me that, you know, on October 24th, 1972, he passed away. And then on December 31st, 1972, Roberto passed away. So you stop and you think, in a 9-week span, two of the greatest legends in Major League Baseball history passed away. And I was a toddler. I was a year and a half old, a little more than that, when these happened. So obviously I don't remember, but I can only imagine what it was like in the baseball world. I don't know how big the community was the card community was in 72, but it definitely existed. And so whoever owned this 56 Jackie, obviously it was, you know, 16 years later, they wanted to commemorate him by writing down what happened to him on their personal baseball card. And, you know, had it happened in the 50s, it would be totally normal. But in the 73 area. I guess it was still. I mean, it was. I want to say that the kids at the time, or the young people at the time, they had an idea that their carts had some value, but maybe due to the centering of the Jackie, the corners, excuse me, they figured it was in low enough condition that they would be all right with themselves for riding on it. And I'm glad they did for multiple reasons. I mean, it commemorates, well, not commemorates the word, but it memorializes the event, has the date on it. It's something that is in blue ballpoint pen, like the Clemente. And also, it ended, the sale price, it was an auction, ended for a lot lower than I had anticipated. I was concerned. I had a limit, like everyone. I like it, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to go berserk to own it. But I wanted to own it, and I was fortunate enough, like, I want to say it was when it ended, and I told my friends, hey, I won that Jackie, and I showed them the listing, and wow, I can't believe it was that cheap. And we always joke around about that, but this was actually that cheap, because I want to say PS8 and SGC ones, are in the, I want to say this was 40% cheaper, 40% cheaper without doing the exact math. So, it blew me away that it was, if that writing wasn't on there, it would have gone for another $60, something like that. I mean, maybe the centering alone might have pushed it up more, but I had told my friends, I'm hoping that the writing on it scares some people off, because it certainly did, based on the final price of the final hammer. So that's just something to think about. Fascinated by these two cards. I would like to add a Munson, but again, these are not things you. Not that they're morbid, they kind of are, but you can't. It's difficult to search for these. Let's put it that way. No one puts in their title, "Oh, they wrote down when they died" on the card. So, I mean, I could, at the show next year, hey, you have any, Clementes, Jackies with some writing on it? Your signature? No, not signature. So, I mean, that's something that's going to be, again, it's just something that shows up when it shows up. If I happen to see it when it's listed, and I have an opportunity to win it, would be just another fantastic addition to my collection. And yeah, I mean, I just think that's something that's fascinating. Mix it up, guys. Don't get burnout, don't get fatigue. It's not that serious. Talk with your friends, make new friends. I mean, I always like to tell you guys, you can't know too much, and always learning and discovering new things, and I think next time I'll talk more about, I discovered a card this past week that I didn't even know existed, and it dumbfounded me that when I was telling my friends about it, they couldn't believe it either.